Good evening.
Hello.
Hello. Yay. Welcome. I'm Christa Wessel, and I am the evening host at All Classical Portland, 89.9, which is the first preset on all of your radios, right? Yes? Okay, good. Thank you for being here today. We've got kind of a special pre-concert talk today. Our half hour together, thank you, Ja Ttik, will be divided into two 15-minute increments. The first 15 minutes is with our principal tubist, Ja Ttik Clark, and then in 15 minutes, I'll let Ja Ttik go warm up because he's got a big, heavy lift today, and we'll bring out the English horn player of the Oregon Symphony, Jason Sudduth, who also has a really big role in tonight's program as well. So that's the game plan today. So let's start with introducing Ja Ttik Clark, who is the principal tuba of the Oregon Symphony.
Thank you.
I say that as if there are multiple tuba players in the Oregon Symphony.
On a rare occasion, you might find that there will be two used for a piece, or maybe even sometimes more, but typically principal, solo, single, a section of one.
And you have been here at the Oregon Symphony for quite some time.
That is correct.
Half your life, is that what you said?
I joined the orchestra in 1999, and it's currently 2022, so you do the math.
Wow. Yeah, you got a big anniversary coming up in a couple of years then, I suppose. Yeah. I have to ask, for somebody who plays such a striking instrument, how did you choose the tuba? Did you choose it when you were like in 5th grade, like most kids choose the tuba? Tell us the story of how this came into your life.
Well, first off, I have a really good friend who also does interviews with low brass players, and I did an interview with him, and he was saying that, he usually asks people, how did they come to choose the tuba? And, based on the stories that he received, he thought, I'm going to revamp that question and call it, how were you tricked into playing the tuba? So, anyway, I started band in 7th grade. We started a little bit later in South Carolina, where I grew up. And I went in wanting to play saxophone. I think most of the kids were wanting to play the cool instrument. That was, I think maybe Kenny G was in his prime, to not date myself. But I went in, I tried all the various mouthpieces, reeds with the band director, and when I picked up the tuba mouthpiece and buzzed on it, she got a big look on her face and just thought, I think that might be a good fit for you. And I was just thinking, no. But my choices were saxophone first, tuba second, and trombone third. And there's a little known or maybe well-known band director maxim that if a kid shows any interest in tuba, you put them on tuba. So that's where I ended up, and here we are.
Here we are. Oh my gosh, no regrets though.
No regrets.
Good, excellent. I'm so glad to hear that. And you yourself have gone on to not only be the principal tuba here in the Oregon Symphony, but you also have, I understand, quite a hefty teaching load.
They just keep offering me jobs, and I keep saying yes. But yes, I currently have titles at 5 university colleges in the area, including Portland State University, Oregon State University, University of Portland, Mount Hood Community College, and Lewis and Clark College.
Woo!
When I'm not back there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk about that, because I don't see you on stage for every piece of music. Nor do I see, there's some concerts I would assume that go by that don't call for tuba at all. How often do you have like a whole weekend off?
Well, it varies. There's been some seasons where I've played pretty much all the classical subscriptions. This particular season, I would say, I think maybe there were 3 or 4 that didn't call for tuba. Of course, I have no control over the programming. If I did, we'd be doing Bruckner every week.
Absolutely.
But that was just a joke.
But I think one of the challenges of your job must be, there are some pieces in which the tuba, the piece is scored for tuba, but you don't come in for minutes, movements. You're just sitting there waiting for your moment, right? Like, how hard is that?
It can be pretty difficult. It obviously requires that you really know the music very well. And for example, let's take Symphony Fantastique. For the first 40, 42 minutes of the piece, you're sitting there with the second tubist. That's one of those few pieces that has more than one. But then, of course, you come in on octave B flats, and you know, as if you've been warmed up and playing the whole time. So the brass players are like the sprinters of the orchestra, whereas the string players would be the distance runners.
Yeah.
You know, the races require very different skill sets, but they're both difficult. Yeah.
And I can't imagine Symphony Fantastique without the tuba. It's got to have the tuba there at the end.
It's got to have two.
It's got to have two. It's that extra oomph you need, right? The tuba adds a little something special to every piece of music. And it requires a lot of breath.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's all do that together. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. Ready? And. One more. Good. And relax. Nobody passed out, right? We're all feeling good. So, right. You like how I incorporated my warm-up into the talk?
Yeah, exactly. This must be a huge part of what you teach your students, right? Like how to breathe.
Yes. You know, it's so funny thinking about all those years I spent learning the instrument, and then finally, you know, and sometimes I still have to remind myself, it's all about the breath. I tell the students that everything starts with a great inhalation. Without that, you don't have anything. Articulation, tone, all of that is important, but you've got to start with fuel, and you've got to start with a great inhalation that relaxes you, fill up. And so it just makes everything so much easier when you take really full breaths and well beyond the conversational breaths that we're all used to taking.
Is there anything else that you have to like train for? Do you have to do strength training or anything like that?
I've certainly been better about getting into the gym on a somewhat regular basis, just because I want to be trim and fit and not carry what I can't flex. But in any event, it certainly helps to have a certain amount of physical strength because of just the nature of the instrument. My biggest horn is about 23 pounds, and that's sitting on my lap. And obviously, I need to be of a certain strength. Although we've got players of all statures and such. Carol, who of course the concerto was written for, she's fairly tall, but certainly not my size. But and she still manages a 6/4 instrument, so she's extremely efficient. And I know that she does yoga, and I typically do weight training and cardio and walking when I can.
Well, you mentioned the concerto. Let's talk about it for a little bit, because I only got you for 5 more minutes.
Oh, it's going fast.
We're going to speed through this. I underlined one section of the program notes that's so interesting. Winton Marsalis encourages each tubist to share their impressions of the concerto with them as they learn it, and even make suggestions for changes. So this is a brand new concerto. It was co-commissioned by 5 orchestras, including the Oregon Symphony.
Correct.
You're giving the West Coast premiere. And were you able to talk to Winton about any changes that you wanted to see?
Well, I did have the fortunate opportunity to be able to interface with Winton early in February when he and his jazz orchestra, Lincoln Center, came through and did their concert. Winton made time after the concert to meet with me with the score, and we went through it, and I was able to ask any questions that I had. At that time, I didn't make any or suggest any changes. I've always considered this to be Carol's piece. It was her idea. They made the initial ask, and I want to respect that. But of course, music is a living art, and the unique thing about Winton is that his pieces, there's a flexibility there, obviously, that you already alluded to. He's willing to change things on a whim, much to some musicians' stress, and because you're trying to memorize something. I'm not gonna play this from memory. I just it's too new, and I just want to make sure I get everything right as best I can. But when you're trying to memorize a piece and suddenly someone said, well, Winton might say, well, I can just change that. Say, no, I've already learned. And so. But his flexibility and his openness to that is really unique, I think. And so a piece, music is living art, but also the piece, evolves. And much like, and I was thinking, it's much like jazz itself. It's never the same twice, you know. So.
Well, I wonder, since none of us have heard this piece before, if you could walk us through each of the movements, because as I understand, they all have extremely different character.
Yes, character is the name of the game. The first movement, up, exclamation point, up. It's just kind of like, you're storming out of the house, getting ready for work. You're probably running a bit late, and so bum 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 bum. And Winton also utilizes a lot of fourths in that one. So, and it kind of and it kind of reminded me a little bit of Tuba the Tuba, bum 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 bum, which we don't do enough here. Just to say, I think I've done it once in all my time here. Yeah. So, Peter the Wolf every year.
But not poor Tubby the Tuba.
Poor Tubby. One melody.
So after Up, we come to the Lament? It's the Boogaloo Americana.
Boogaloo Americana, yes. This piece is all about vibe and attitude. It's all in the attitude with this one. It's a really nice, just a lot of different, I think there's Mambo, there's Big Sky Habanera, there's Boogaloo, of course. Just a lot of different changes in there, and I kind of imagine this one, maybe you've gotten to work and you're just kind of doing your normal routine, and it's just kind of, the same thing, do this, do that, and you're trying to spice it up a little bit. Maybe you have the radio on in the background or something, jamming or something, so, yeah.
Then Lament, the slow movement, I think you said to me you felt like this was the heart of the piece.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly not Dido's Lament. I was just thinking about famous laments. But this one, it's a really heartfelt, you'll see, especially toward the end there. And just to tell you all, the final note of that movement is meant to be, he actually specifies that he wants it between major and minor.
Between major and minor?
Yeah.
What does that mean? One note between major and minor?
Well, the way I'm going to interpret it, is I'm literally going to make an adjustment to my instrument so that I'm playing the note. If we talk about tuning and there's 100 cents between half steps, I'm trying to put it at the 50.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it's meant to be out of tune. Just letting you know. That's the point.
Is there? I know there are a couple of extended techniques throughout this piece. I feel like you told me at one point there was some kind of like howling sound or something like that.
Well, he asks for howls in terms of in the lament. You'll hear the strings kind of and winds and doing that sort of thing. Just that kind of, but the specific extended technique that I think of is the multiphonics that he asked for in the first movement, where you're playing a note with the embouchure, with the lips, while harmonizing it with a note from your vocal cords at the same time.
So singing and playing simultaneously.
Yes, hopefully.
Hopefully. Is that...
just to make a point about that, and Carol talked about this in her interview with Winton when they talked about the piece. Carol had found that with multiphonics, most of the time that she encountered it, the sung notes were usually in the male voice tessitura. So in Winton's piece, they are pretty high. Thankfully, I have a falsetto that will allow me to reach most of them.
Oh, so not only are you playing, but you're singing falsetto.
Extended techniques.
So singing falsetto simultaneously.
Yes.
Oh my goodness gracious. And then the last movement just sounds like mayhem.
Yes, with heavy emphasis on the mayhem. In Bird's basement, referring to Charlie Parker, bebop. Carol specifically wanted bebop, and so I think Winton originally had a different idea in mind for the fourth movement, but he reworked it into a bebop. And it's funny because recently there were some tempo adjustments, and he wants it faster. Boy, it's different on a trumpet. That's all I got to say. It's a little easier to play that fast with smaller instruments, smaller valves, and less wind required.
Well, you were telling me the other day when we talked too that it's so fast that you had to adjust the valve springs. Is that right?
Thankfully I had a set of piston valve springs that were lighter than the ones I were currently using, and so I changed them out just to make sure that so I could facilitate the changes. It's that fast. So I had to almost, not to say get a new instrument, but I had to just kind of reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. Is it at all nerve-wracking for you? I mean, you've been in that back row for 23 years now. Is it at all nerve-wracking to sit up here at the front?
I have to say I've had a few opportunities to come up front, and it's always, for tubas especially, it's always a wonderful thing to be thought of in that regard, to be featured at the front. And certainly with a new work like this, it's really a thrill, and I'm so happy to get to share this with all of you, and my colleagues have been so supportive. But make no mistake, I like it back there.
Well, that said, Ja Ttik, I want to give you plenty of time to warm up before tonight's performance. So would you join me in thanking him for his time today? Ja Ttik Clark.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You just set that down there. As Jason Sudduth prepares to come out, I want to direct you to page 28 in your program, if you don't mind. I've just got just a second that I want to share with you. At the bottom here, this little advertisement for next Saturday's concert, An African American Requiem. It's a world premiere by composer Damian Jeter. It's basically a social justice requiem, and it's going to be a special one-night event that is broadcast by All Classical Portland and simulcast by WQXR in New York City. We believe so strongly in this piece that we are broadcasting it live. So if you're not able to be here in person for the incredibly moving event, I hope you will join us on the radio for an early start on Saturday to accommodate that New York broadcast. It starts at 6 o'clock on Saturday, simulcast in New York at 9. Okay, so we hope to see you there. This is Jason Sudduth, who is the English horn player for the Oregon Symphony.
Hey, how are you guys doing? This is pretty cool.
You haven't done this before.
I have not done this before. This is a big honor. I appreciate you bringing me on, Christa.
Yeah, so you are a relatively new face here at the Symphony. How long have you been here?
That's right. This is sort of my second season. I came out during the 2019-2020 season, and of course that got cut short, and all of us were sort of furloughed and all that stuff for a couple of years almost, and that was crazy. And they were nice enough to ask me to come back. Last summer, I started talking with the management and oboe section, and they were interested in bringing me back this season, which I was super grateful for. And it's just such a good orchestra, So
you're like on a special one-year contract or something like that?
That's right. I'm technically the acting English horn and third oboist here. So because my predecessor went on and got a job in Pittsburgh, and he's a good friend. His name's Kyle. You guys might remember Kyle Mustaine,
yeah.
Amazing player. So yeah, and this just happens to be one of those seasons where there's 4 or 5 really huge English horn pieces throughout especially the second half of the season. We did the Concerto de Aranjuez, right? That's got a big English horn part. The Ravel Piano Concerto, and now we're doing New World, and then we're going to do the Pines of Rome at the end of the season, which has a huge English horn part as well. So
keeping you on your toes.
That's right.
That's right. It's a big season for English horn and tuba.
That's
Who knew?
Correct. That's right. I mean, yeah, it's pretty fun. The auxiliary, or sort of the lesser known instruments, getting a little more, a little more play out there.
So I asked Ja Ttik the same question. How did this strange instrument come into your life?
I mean, with English horn, it's almost an accident because we start out on oboe, right? English horn is just a larger, lower version of the oboe. So I started playing oboe when I was about 12. I'm the son of a band director and a choir director. And my dad at the time had really good oboe players in his wind ensemble at Texas Tech University. And I thought, well, that's a cool sound. And there's only like 2 of them down there. Clarinets, there's like 40 of them. There's a billion flute players, a bunch of sax players. But there was only a couple of oboe players. So I thought it was kind of a practical decision. And then coming into English horn usually comes a little later. Maybe I did one English horn thing in youth orchestra, maybe as a 10th grader or like early high school. Then you revisit it 1 or 2 times in college. By the time I did my master's, I was doing a little more of it. Like you sort of get thrown to the wolves a little bit with some big English horn parts in the orchestra, in the big orchestra well, I went to Rice University for my master's, and that's where you sort of get to be like, okay, and you really got to learn how to make the reeds the right way, and you have to sort of figure out some of the differences between English horn and oboe and stuff. So that it was kind of during that time, my master's, and after that, where I put in more and more time on it. You know, otherwise you have a lot of oboe players that never want to go near it because it's got its own set of issues. It's got its own, you know, it's got its own little quirks, and the reeds are completely different than oboe reeds. So
I
it's
didn't
like
know that.
yeah, it's like another skill you have to learn in making the English horn reeds.
So it looks like an oboe. It's bigger than an oboe, and it's got, can you see at the bottom, like it's got this bulb at the bottom?
Looks like it swallowed a rat down there, right? It's like some sort of, it's like a snake when it, you know, they get the whole mouse in there and it's all perforated. Sorry, that's pretty graphic. Anyway, yeah, the bell sort of helps it to resonate the right way, especially with the lower instrument, the lower notes on the instrument. And then it has this strange piece up top, which is sort of similar to a bassoon vocal, but just shorter, you know, and smaller. And it's basically an extension of the reed itself. So, and it's all sort of cone-shaped. So the opening of the reed is very tiny, and then it gets gradually a little wider through the vocal. And then through the whole instrument, it gets wider and wider and wider, like a really elongated cone shape. It's such a weird thing, but.
Would you mind playing a little bit for those of us who might not be familiar with the sound?
Yeah.
And he will have a huge solo in Dvořák's New World Symphony in the slow movement. I don't know if that's what you're preparing to play for us now, or you want to play a few notes.
I don't know. Let's see.
I'll see what comes out.
Let's see what happens. Yeah. All right. All right, so you guys might have heard some of the Concerto de Aranjuez before. So that's beautiful, right? I love that one. And then, so the New World one, thank you. The New World one you guys will probably recognize as well. It's a folk song that Dvořák came up with on his own that later got a title put to it called Going Home and lyrics added to it by a former student of his. And it's real simple. It sounds like this.
Gorgeous. Gorgeous.
Thank you. So, yeah.
I'm going to hand you the microphone back. That's absolutely gorgeous. And I find it helps to see the instrument because when he's back here buried in the mass of everybody, you don't really get to see the beauty of the instrument. So thank you for pointing that out to us. It must be so thrilling to see repertoire like this pop up on the agenda.
Yeah, some of my colleagues have been joking around that it's like year of the English horn. I don't know about that, but it's there's been sort of like David Dansmeyer has come to me and he says, "We are putting you through your paces and you are just dealing with it and you're doing great." He's so funny. He's a huge support. But it's fun. I mean, this is what we live for, right? You wanna sort of get your voice out there and play beautiful melodies and that's kind of what it's all about for us. So sort of like Ja Ttik was saying, you know, just getting that opportunity to solo and stuff.
So how much of your time, you said this is an English horn heavy season, at least the second half of this season. How much of your time would you say is spent on this instrument versus playing an oboe part in the orchestra?
I mean, it's a good question. I probably do this anytime there's an English horn part on anything. So whether it's pops or whether it's a movie score that we're doing or whatever, I'm the guy that will cover it. So I probably do English horn maybe 2/3 of the time, and then we rotate. It's a 3-person section, so Marty or Karen might take a piece off, and then I'll play second oboe, or any number of sort of ways that we could do it that way. So maybe 1/3 of the time on oboe.
Is it hard to switch back and forth? You said that the reeds are different, everything's different.
Yeah, it can be a challenge, and when you take auditions sometimes that are for English horn positions, they will put you through the ringer going back and forth between oboe and English horn just to see if you can deal with it, just for fun. I don't know. Some sadistic, I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, it can be challenging, and that's why a lot of oboe players don't want to play English horn, is because it is hard to go back and forth. Your embouchures, the oboe reed's a little smaller, there's more pressure playing an oboe, playing it on an oboe reed, so your mouth might be situated a little differently. But I don't know, I think, like I do it in the New World Symphony tonight. I'll go from oboe on the first movement, English horn on the second movement, and then back to oboe for the third and fourth movements. And you just have to kind of get used to it,
Oh, that didn't occur to me. Like, you're not playing English horn all the way up to the big solo.
No.
That horn is sitting there waiting to be picked up, and then bam, you're in the spotlight, yeah?
It is, and I cheat a little bit at the end of the first movement by taking the English horn, because it's pretty loud and no one can really hear the second oboe player, at that point. So I'll take the English horn and I'll sort of transpose some of those notes so they sound so the right notes come out, because this is built in the key of F and oboe's built in the key of C. So I transpose just to get a little warm up, make sure the reed actually works before the second movement thing. It's such a gorgeous thing. You want to make sure that reed is vibrating, right? Before you start playing that solo. So.
All right, so if you're in the balcony, watch Jason at the end of the first minute.
Right, look at Jason cheat. What is he doing? He's not supposed to play that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can see that we're sadly out of time. I
Yep.
feel like I could talk to you for another 15 minutes, and Ja Ttik too, so we don't, but regardless, I thank you for coming early and learning a little bit about these two featured soloists tonight. Enjoy the concert, and oh my gosh, a big thank you to Jason Sudduth for his time tonight.
Thank you guys. Have a great time. Thanks, Christa.